This is my theory. This is my observation. Throughout my 38 years of life, I have seen a pattern, and here it is. People who I have met, people who I have been exposed to, that were alcoholics or drug addicts or suffered from severe depression. They all, without exception, had one thing in common, that without ever me asking about it or engaging them in it, without me even being around them long, on their own, they brought up whatever traumatic event that happened to them in their youth that ultimately never got resolved. And usually, often, it was something to do with one of their parents, whether their father was absent or abusive. And even if it was emotionally abusive, and that was the only way it was abusive, it still was abuse. It was never dealt with. Often, if it wasn't the father, then it was the mother. The mother had issues as far as being consistent and being there for them as a mother, being there showing them the love that they needed to get from their mother, that sort of thing. Or some kind of event happened out of their control. And I tell this very sad story that did not happen to me, but because I don't have a brother, but this concept of, or when they were a kid, they were playing at the lake or the pond, and they were there with their brother, and then he slipped into the water and drowned, and there was nothing they could do, and they've carried that with them. There's these traumatic stories that people have in common that are alcoholics, drug addicts, or have issues with depression. It could even be this. This may seem so normal, but it could have been that your parents got divorced. Your parents got divorced when you were a kid, as you were still developing your sense of identity and needing such a balanced relationship with your parents, but then your dad had to move out or whatever, and then you only saw him every other weekend and something like that, and then your mother's talking bad about your father, all that stuff, or whatever. I think even a divorce can do. I've personally seen someone who had everything going for them in life until their parents got divorced. And not only did they lose on everything they were going to have, but now I don't know where they went to. I mean, this person had the best grades ever. They had everything set up for college, to become an engineer. But ultimately, that ghost that was haunting them of their parents splitting up got to the best. And I don't think that person is even, I think they just live at home, like with one of their parents, and they don't ever get out. Like, that's someone I personally know, I've known my whole life. And that's just one example. Here's what I'm getting at. I feel that culture teaches us, if you're an alcoholic, it's because you were born that way. You are going to be more likely to become addicted to alcohol. Now, here's what I'm saying. I believe those genes exist. I believe certain people can become addicted to certain things that others couldn't. I'm not addicted to alcohol, but maybe I could be more easily addicted to sugar. A lot of people are addicted to sugar. So you have, especially in Baptist culture in the South, you have people who say, oh, I'm not drinking alcohol, alcohol's a sin. But then they'll end up, getting diabetes by the time they're in their 40s because they eat so much sugar and overeat so much in general. So they're addicted to eating, which often people who are addicted to eating still fall into that category of having some kind of traumatic event in their past that they never dealt with. And I've mentioned this too about, what's the show, My 700-Pound Life or 800-Pound Life, that show on TLC. Every episode you watch, 20 minutes into it, they're gonna tell you whatever happened to them made them that way. Hoarders, that show. What's another show? My Strange Addiction. It's always the same thing. Something happened to them traumatically in their life. They never dealt with it, and this is their way of coping with it. Alcohol is how they cope with it. Drugs is how they cope with it. Or just losing the ability to be able to control their emotions and just kind of letting it go because they don't even know how to control anything anymore, including their own emotions. And ultimately, now they're depressed. That's where they go. They stay in that part because they ultimately get stuck in that year. And when they were 13 or 9 or 15, whatever it was, they get stuck there. I have never in my life met an exception to this rule. Alcoholics, drug addicts, and people who suffer from major depression all had some kind of traumatic event that never got resolved. Now here's what I'm not saying. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that if some kind of traumatic event happened to you, that means you're going to become addicted to drugs or alcohol or depressed. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying of all the people who do suffer from alcoholism, addicted to drugs, and depression, all you have to do is hang around them 10 minutes. You're probably going to hear the story that caused it. And it's not like they're hiding it. Usually they'll tell you what it is without you ever asking. So what I'm saying is, if you come from a background, if you are in one of those categories, chances are you're in a group of people who has that similar backstory. But what I'm not saying is, if, let's say your parents got divorced and then you watched your brother drown and all these things, you may turn out okay, and you may not become addicted to drugs and may not, etc. So it's not reversible. Can I be so clear about this? Here's what I'm saying. If you're a drug addict, alcoholic, or suffer from depression, I've never met anybody in that category who didn't have a traumatic backstory that was unresolved. That's what I am saying. What I'm not saying is, if you've had some kind of traumatic thing happen to you, then you're definitely going to become a drug addict. Now, see, it only, do you follow me what I'm saying? A shared background. That's what I'm focusing on. And I make this video because I think it needs to be talked about. Now, granted, I'm no professional. I'm not an expert. I am a random guy on the internet with no authority on anything. But I think it's important that we have this conversation because I think our culture teaches us, you're an alcoholic, well, guess what? Join the step program, the 12 steps, and for the rest of your life, you're an alcoholic, that's what you're going to do. So that's your identity now. But is there any talk of actually addressing the psychological issue that started this whole thing, of what ultimately led you into that life? Drug addict. Oh, you've got to go in the program. You're addicted. You're an addict now. So the rest of your life, you're an addict. Don't be using. Go to this program. Live in a halfway house. Go through all the thing. But are we addressing the issue of the fact that your mother left when you were only 8 years old, and then your dad ended up leaving, and then you were raised by your older brother? Was that ever addressed? No, because while you're an addict, they make you that label. Or, oh, okay, well, you have depression issues. Well, here's your medicine. Just take this medicine the rest of your life. Is it important that we talk about what you're covering up, what the hole you're trying to fill? Do we need to talk about it? No. Just take these drugs and it's okay, which is funny and ironic because for drug addicts, don't do drugs. But if you have depression, do drugs. But either way, we're not addressing the issue and people are not talking about this. That's why I'm making this video, because I think there needs to be an open conversation that if you suffer from one of those things, and the title of this video, have you dealt with your trauma that happened to you in your youth with a professional, not this guy, random guy on the internet, that's all, with a professional. That's the only way you're going to proceed in life and get out of that. The world wants to tell you that this is your identity now. But I say no. I say we can dig deeper than this. We can try harder than this. We can be more honest than this. We can find redemption. So if you fall in one of those categories and you would like to say, you know what, you are some random guy on the internet, but you're like the most real person I've heard talk about this maybe in my whole life, and you're right, and then you'll agree with me. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who, I'm not asking you to tell me your backstory. I'm just saying, hey, this is a pattern that people are ignoring and not talking about. And I think if I can just be one crazy guy on the internet to help you realize, wait a minute, I have an issue that I never got resolved. It's a psychological issue. And by default, maybe it was my genetics that was going to lead me to alcohol addiction. Or maybe alcohol wasn't my thing and I can't handle alcohol, but I can handle meth or heroin or whatever it is. I think, yes, genetically, you're predisposed to certain things. Maybe drugs and alcohol aren't your thing at all. But ultimately, the concept of depression is just your default. You're like, I don't even want to try to control it anymore. It's controlling me. This is who I am. And that becomes your go-to. I think, yeah, genetically, we're probably more lined up to one of those things. And there's other vices too. Your comments belong right here. And no, I'm not going to do my research before making this video, because I'm not an expert. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm a random guy on the internet with no authority. I refuse to do research. This is my research. Comments.